Hey guys, welcome back. So with me today, I have Opt Flow, right? So we decided to, combine, charts and flow with FOMC coming up. So I'll let OPT introduce himself to you.
Hey everyone, I'm OPT, and yeah, I mostly trade off options flow, and looking forward to going over what we're see coming up this week.
Yeah, so let's get started, right? I've shown you guys this chart on ES many times, right? And this one seems to be playing out because, we know that this line has been held as downtrend resistance. And where did we sell off? On Friday, we hit the top of the resistance and boom, we had a massive sell off. So bigger picture, right? Let's go to a lower time frame, let's say the 4 hours. You can see we know that 4267 was honestly the level to hold at least on a weekly close, and 4400 was major resistance. So when we sold off on Friday, right from these levels, it shouldn't have been a surprise. But what's interesting is that they actually kind of made it obvious, right? Because we know the minute the market holds a low below this level, it actually becomes really bearish. So that's kind of why I'm kind of suspicious about this move, although it does perfectly play out in my wave count. I do have a double zigzag, and this was my ABC in the Y wave inside a bigger Y wave. So this is a pretty complicated count, right? So I have this, you can see that every time we reject the top of this line, I have us going, to retest the bottom of this trend line, which is, I'd say 3967, 4000 approximately, right? So that's kind of my take on the market, right? And but you want to go over some of the SPY puts that you saw?
Yeah, sure. So what I saw interesting on Friday was we had quite a lot of activity. And right after the bell on Friday, we had three options flow come in on SPY for April 14th, strike 401 puts, all sweepers. And the first two that came across were over 8 million. And then you had one that came across afterwards, just under a million at 800,000. But it was just really sneaky, wait until 403 to 406 to place those trades. That really caught my eye. I mean, that's another 19 points from where we are now. Not that much time, about a month out, especially coming into FOMC, VIX expiration, quad witching, all that. Then we also saw the 405s come in as well on the put side for April 14th. That one had just around 2.5 million in it on 4 different orders. And then we also saw the 420, which came in. Now they started buying these when SPY was at 427, 424, 420 on Friday. But what was nice about those is they're at the money. And what was sneaky about them was they weren't above open interest on the volume on the day, but they were all on the ask side. And there was a $1.2 million order flow. And then combined, it was, call it right around 2.2, 2.3 million. And then also on the algo side, you saw them both just dip hard, especially on the intraday, right at market close. There was some bullish divergence, and then it just crushed down, and that's going to be wiped out Monday morning. And then on the longer term trend on the 15, it's definitely on a downturn again, but playing nicely within some of those recent dark pool level prints. So when I post those, you can grab those or get the from the flow algo. It's the yellow and orange lines.
So yeah, this is something I wanted to ask you about because on the smaller time frames, it does look like the algo is kind of behaving bullishly, where you could kind of maybe expect a gap up on Monday, but the flow kind of tells the opposite story, right? Whenever I've seen this kind of flow with you, it generally we tend to gap down on Monday. So what's kind of your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I could see maybe a little bit of like a bullish bounce, kind of like we saw, um, last week a few times, and then it just gets faded throughout the day. But if you look at that 1 minute, which is the left hand top and bottom of the flow algo chart, it's that end of the day, it just dropped, right? I mean, they just stopped everything. And I understand it was Friday, it's market closed, but to have that bullish divergence and then just crush like that, I'm not super hopeful for the bulls on Monday, but
Yeah, yeah.
next week's going to
So
have a lot of volatility expiration.
yeah, I get that. And also, like you mentioned, right, it was on the 1 minute time frame. And like we know the higher the time frame, the more likely, it's to play out. So if we saw something like that on, let's say, the higher time frames, then I guess, we would be more optimistic for the bulls.
Right.
Yeah, so I know how you love being bullish, right? So I did make, an alternative scenario. It is, I would give this maybe a 5 to 10% probability over, us retesting the bottom of this trend line. But just for your sake, I made a bullish chart. And it's
Thank you.
I I have an expanded flat, right? So you can see that this expanded flat, right? I have it retesting. You can see the B goes all the way to the 1.23 fib at 410. So maybe, the market has like, we saw the flow, so we know like the probability of gapping down on a Monday is probably high. So maybe we have that, that kind of flush and pump where, we just, fake out the bears, take them all out, right? And then we have this insane move to the upside before we actually have the bigger drawdown into 3,800s. Any thoughts on this bullish chart?
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that theory playing out given next week with, Powell on the 16th, and a lot of the end of the month, quad witching, all that stuff, with a lot of options activity being closed. I mean, you could see something like that because, bears, like you said, if it gaps down, bears are going to start closing out their positions, taking profits, and that could provide some sort of relief rally.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would honestly give this maybe a 5% chance, but who knows, right? Let's just keep it on our radar for now. All right, let's move on to the Qs, right? After SPY. So again, I'm sure this is not a shock to you that I have a very bearish chart and my targets are kind of, 313 and 288. Like I've had this for a while now. So this, we can see this kind of aligns with the put flow that came in for the Qs, right? They were just, I think all of Friday, they were just kind of slamming the brakes, but it does look like the expiry you sent me was for last week. What do you think about that?
So there's also other put flow, but yeah, the ones I sent last week are the ones for last week were pretty interesting just because it showed you what, really drove down the market on Friday.
Mhm.
And not specifically this flow or anything of that nature, but just the amount of put activity that we saw coming in. I thought I sent it to you, but I will send it to you momentarily. But there are some Qs for 316, 329 puts. Came in right around $1 million, which I thought was really interesting because they came in midday on Friday. And again, with not that much time left, they're expiring very soon. It's not obviously a big move. They're at the money, but I thought that was interesting. And then on 414, the 325 puts came in. Again, they were under open interest, so they didn't maybe flag anything. But combined, there was 3 orders, and it was $1.5 million again. Not a big move. They were buying them in the money and out of the money, but still pretty negative there. Reasonable amount of money, but also Q's had a bigger flush, so I think more people are in SPY puts right now, anyways.
Yeah, so would you say, how like in the past we've gamma squeezed upwards on Tesla and Nvidia? Would you say, they've actually started to, squeeze us to the downside? Like I feel like, like not a lot of people kind of see that, or I feel like a lot of people do see that coming, but no one has an idea if they've actually started to do it. So, based on this 11-3 flow, do you think that put squeeze to the downside is possible?
I think there could be something of that nature that could play out. But again, I would also say that's a lower percent chance just given everything that's going on with next week, again, with FOMC. The Qs could have that same sort of scenario, maybe like the SPY that you mentioned, where they gap down and then as puts get closed, it starts to relief rally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know how you love your bull version, so we can take a look at that as well, right? So on this, you can see, honestly, this, whatever I'm going to explain might play out to my bear side, but you can see this, right? This blue channel that I have drawn, we clearly, broke down from the channel on 10th Jan, right? We retested it. And ever since then, we've kind of been breaking lower. So generally, when you tend to break a channel like this, right, we tend to test the lower bound of the channel from which the rally started, and that puts us at 261, right? That's a really good bear dream. But anyway, that's not what I wanted to point out, right? I wanted to point out that for the Qs as well, I think I have some of the flow you sent me, OPT. I think
Yeah.
where the 16.3 and 14.4s you were mentioning. Yeah. So anyway, as I was saying, right? So one scenario, like we discussed, right? We just kind of have that gap down Monday, right? So let's say to about, I don't know, 310, 304, right? We have that intense gap up, and then we have that bullish relief rally, which actually, goes higher into FOMC before, we have the post FOMC kind of sell off. So I think that would kind of play out in the scenario that I have drawn, right? And the algos, again, on the 1 minute and 5 minute, they seem to be pretty bullish as opposed to, the longer time frame. So that could be a possible scenario that we can keep an eye on. So I just wanted to point it out, but mainly why I wanted to show you this chart is I wanted to bring your attention to this channel that we actually broke down from. And when you break a channel like that, you tend to test the lower bounds of it. So Qs in that case, have maybe another 20 more percent to go. So that would put the total correction at 40%. Do you think that's doable? Will they let that happen?
I don't. I It's hard for me to envision a 40% correction in the Qs. Not saying that it couldn't happen. If that were to happen, I would say we would have a pretty drastic shift in other economic factors or some other black swan event for it to go down another 20%.
Yeah, I agree with that. But bears can never be too greedy, huh? All right. Let's look at IWM, the next one, the next index we wanted to see. So again, the first version I'm showing you guys is the bear one, right? In that I do expect us to, go down and test about 173. And this is the put flow, OPT semi. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting put flow. We've seen this play out recently a lot with IWM. They've hit strikes earlier this year, pretty heavy like this, where you see 4 million, 2.3 million, 600 or 700K, quite a bit of money here. And it's all sort of been, I don't say it's always been right, but I think it's been right 90% of the time this year on those things. Like we've talked about, when you see just that heavy of a put flow, a little bit of time, about a month out, pretty reasonable size move there. This one did catch my eye, and is definitely something I'm watching out for. The only thing that's interesting is you'll see the divergence on the 1 minute and 15 minute on the algos, but that flow seems a lot stronger than what I would say the algos would do for right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. But just to, please the algos, I kind of made the alternate version, right? Where we have that quick flush on Monday, and then, we kind of have that B wave bump up before we come down for the C wave. So, it kind of remains the same on the bull case for IWM, which is the algos. But yeah, I would have to, just the way this has been playing out and how every time we hit the trend line, right, we tend to reject and sell off. Like, I do give the bears the upper hand, especially, right? Let's move on to some of the heavyweights like Apple, right? Stuff like Apple has not yet below the 200-day rate, but it's not very far off. It's maybe 3 points, right? Let's move this. Yeah, Apple's almost there, guys. If Apple gaps down, right? If it gaps below the 200-day, I think that's a pretty bearish sign for the market, because most of, everyone watches Apple. Apple is basically, makes up a lot of S&P and like tech and everything. So for Apple to gap down below the 200-day Monday morning, that's pretty bearish for the rest of the market. And I do have Apple in, a wave C, a wave 3, and a wave C, and a wave Y. So that's honestly a very bearish wave. So I would not, be surprised if Apple actually gap down below the 200-day and we continue the sell off. OPT, any thoughts on the algos? I see that it doesn't have bullish divergence for once, but it looked like maybe sometime there we can see this green bar, but it got completely squashed. So would that kind of tell us that most bullish divergence on this flow cannot really be trusted without other TA?
Yeah, I would say even with that little bit of bullish divergence on the 1 minute on Friday, that line is pretty much down and to the right, the purple algo line. I would say that's just pure net selling all day. And then if you look at the larger time frame too, that's just been pure net selling for a while. And then you saw that put flow pretty sneaky, a little bit of time on there, bought till May 20th, but they bought the 150 puts. They put about 3 million behind it. What I like about size was about 4,000 contracts. So pretty interesting, but I would say the flow, the algos, and your bearish count, they're all sort of seeing the same thing in Apple's future.
Yeah, and that kind of scares me that all three are aligned because, like, is it really playing towards our bias or are we actually on the right track? Sometimes I ask myself that because, it seems too good to be true because, me and you are kind of always on opposing ends and for once we're actually aligned.
That's true. That's true. But I will say the few times you and I have noticed when all things line up, if it does work out, the move's been pretty good. And, like you said earlier, Apple makes up a lot of the market. It has the ability to move a lot of things.
Yeah, completely agree. Another, if you wanted another picture of Apple here, we can see that, right, you guys can see that what Apple did is ever since August 2020, it's kind of been in this rising wedge, right? And you can see Apple actually broke out here, right? And we've come back into the wedge. Generally, when something breaks out to the upside and it fails, it tends to have a harsh sell-off to, the mean. And mean of Apple puts it at about 101, and that could kind of align with Q's at 267. But anyway, this is supposed to be the bull version. I just, wanted to show you guys where you can see that Apple is actually, holding the bottom of this trend line. So if the bulls wanted to push into FOMC and fake out the bears, certainly possible, right? Here's one bull version, right? Where this is your AB and we push, right? The 200-day holds miraculously on Apple and we actually go higher. Right? Or the other version is that we make a new low, but Apple gets bought up because, who doesn't want to buy Apple on the 200-day, right? That's where most people, most long-term investors tend to buy stock. So we have that push. So again, keep your eyes open because it is FOMC, quad chain, week's expiration, name it, right? It's going to be a really volatile week. So this is certainly possible, but as I mentioned, right, when something fake breaks out and comes down lower, let's say Apple actually breaks this trend line, you tend to have a massive sell-off. So I am bearish, but just don't be hesitant to see the bullish side of things as well. So that's Apple, right? We can move on to another heavyweight, which is Google. No surprise here again, OPT, right? Here we have the bearish flow and the algos seem to be net selling off. And, if you wanted to look at this OPT, we can see that, this is basically a 2-year channel Google was in, right? We sold off and then Google had that kind of, I would say a fake push higher, right? I have this in an expanded flat count where, we pretty much almost retest this and have a massive sell-off. So in my book, right, when you go to retest something that you've broken down from, you tend to have a massive sell-off. And that kind of explains why, Google has been selling off since earnings. And this obviously is my bear count. Any thoughts on this, OPT?
No, I would say, again, this is another one where the algos, the flow and your count seem to be lining up. There's, bearish put flow that we had come in, and then the algos again, while it's not maybe the strongest net selling, it is net selling for sure.
Yeah. Let's see what we have for the bull version, right? I think the bull assumes that Google will, gap down. I do think Google is gonna, the reason Google will make a new low as compared to, what I show you for Tesla is because, Google had that push on earnings that kind of, like makes it an expanded flat, which, makes the C wave more aggressive to the downside. So I do think bull or bear, Google will revisit about 2,400. So before we have that push, so we could just sell off right before FOMC and have that push higher if they want to play out the bull count. But I do think this is more likely, and as you said, the flow and algos align. The next one we should probably look at is Amazon, right? Amazon has been in this bull flag pattern, and then it just broke down, right? The minute it broke down, you saw it kind of flush that happen. So this is kind of what I was telling you guys about on Apple, right? When something breaks a long channel, right? And obviously you can see that it went to retest, and most of the times it breaks and retests. You did have that retest, you tend to have an epic flush. So that is certainly possible, right? If we go back to Apple's chart here, we can see that this was kind of the pattern Apple was in, and we had that fake breakout. So if Apple breaks down, right, below its 200-day and below this channel, that did hold a support, you can kind of expect, this kind of flush that Amazon had, and that would kind of explain the ES and QQQ counts that I've kind of shown you guys. But yeah, Amazon, we broke down, right? And we retested it again on earnings, right? We went to retest it, we came apart, again, flow, right? Again, they announced a stock split. So most companies tend to announce stock splits when, their EPS is falling apart. I'm not surprised Amazon announced it right before, Rivian is reporting, because you could see how much Rivian kind of made up last earnings, and this earnings, when Rivian gets hit, most people know Amazon is gonna get hit as well, right? So you can see Amazon is on the longer time frame. You can see this was a channel that Amazon was in, and now we're actually breaking down from this downtrend channel. So I do expect kind of a flush in the case of Amazon as well, right? So that's the bear version of Amazon. The bull version is here. Here's the algo flow and some calls that OPT posted. OPT, why did these calls kind of catch your attention? Any thoughts?
Yeah. So what I thought was interesting about the calls were they actually, if you notice, started on the bid side above open interest, and then it also closed on the bid side. And in the middle on that ask, the price did move up. So I'm actually inclined to look at these and go that is actually bearish call writing. So these are sell to open. And it aligns with the algos, because the algos are just net selling on all the time frames, and they're breaking through the dark pool and light pool print levels, the yellow and orange horizontal lines on the algos. So I'm actually in line with you that we're gonna go down.
Yeah, I agree with that, right? This is my primary case where I do think we break the previous lows at 2,700, and we actually test, 24 and 2,000. But, alternatively, I do think that regardless of whether you're a bull or bear, right, in Amazon, I do think we will, we can see this, split gap that we had here. So I do think we will come fill this gap, right, at 2,800. So that's at least 100 points lower before it actually pushes here. So even in my bull, short-term bull case, I do think it fills the gap lower. So I do kind of agree that flow being, bearish call writing makes sense, even in the case that, we have to fill the gap, right? They still would make a lot of money in the premiums that get crushed in this zone. So yeah, that's nice. Another thing I wanted to point out was that Amazon, you can see that this was the long-term, channel Amazon was in. And the first time we broke it, massive flush. We went to retest it. Again, we flushed, right? And now we have been making a series of lower highs. So that's the reason, I do lean more bearish than I lean bullish. So let's look at the next one. Everyone's favorite, Tesla. That's my favorite Elon meme, right? So this is my count on Tesla, where I think we're actually in a wave 5, in a wave 3, in a wave 5, in a wave A, in a wave C, in a wave C, in a wave A, right? So long story short, I think Tesla will come down to 585, right? And this is some of, the algos that you kind of showed me. And it does look like it's net selling, right, OPT? Or do you kind of give more preference to this bullish divergence at the end of the day?
No, that bullish divergence was, while it's there, and it was for a brief moment in time on Friday, it wasn't very strong. It couldn't break above the print levels, again, the yellow and orange horizontal line. And if you look on the longer term, on the 15-minute, it's just net selling. The only thing that there is some put flow at 835, which is already in the money, expiring on 318. Couple million behind it, 2.5, 2.6 million, something like that. That's behind it, but I'm a little bearish on Tesla, except for that one thing we all saw on Friday that I shared with you.
Yeah, so we'll go show people that too. But another thing that we should see is that Tesla closed below its 200-day, I think, for the first time in a while, right? Yeah, because a weekly close below the 200-day has not been seen in a while. And except for Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they're all, closing below the 200-day. So I think that in itself should, kind of give a sign to most people, right? Like the heavyweights, like the FANGs are, being sold off. And if they're right below the 200-day, unless there's kind of, that catch save on Monday, I don't see anything from, stopping the market from just, aggressively having a bad week. right? I think that gives more preference to the bears as well. Closing below the 200-day means there's no more buyers left at the 200-day where people normally buy. And let's look at the bull flow OPT spoke about. OPT, you want to kind of talk about this massive set of gamblers, like I like to call them, on Tesla?
Yeah, so I mean, it came in on Friday pretty heavy, 422. So they did buy some time on the 940 calls, and it was just quite a bit of money that just kept coming in. Really interesting. I've seen flow like this before play out, and I've also seen flow like this before go really, really badly. So they're expensive. They're about $2,000 a contract, so it's not something I really recommend anyone gambling on. I saw them. They're interesting. It could be worth it, but I don't know. With this market, it's a little shaky. But Tesla can do its own thing. It doesn't necessarily have to follow the rest of the market. So it's definitely something interesting to watch.
Well, so as promised, right? I told you I'll show you the bull version. So even in Tesla, we can kind of see that gap down on Monday, right? Kind of play out before it actually gets saved. So I'm not saying this is gonna happen, but it kind of matches the flow, right? This count kind of matches the flow where let's say I'd say Tesla at about 740 to 750. That's kind of the area bulls would need to save it, right? If they can save it here, then they have a chance of, testing 1100. And that's probably why they bought these contracts, right? It kind of aligned with the time frame into April as well. So that's one scenario that could make sense for this flow. But I would have to say, as I mentioned, we are below the 200-day, right? And we're heading into FOMC. And this is my primary bear count, right? I think we put a wave 3 top. So yeah, let's see if the bulls or bears win. I vote the bears. What about you, OPT? Gonna pick the bulls?
Because of the flow, I'm gonna pick the bulls.
Okay, OPT. We'll do a 2.0 version of this PowerPoint in a month, and let's see who was right.
Oh, great.
All right, let's move on to one of the semis, right? I think whatever we say for NVIDIA kind of holds for the rest of the semis as well. So this is my primary count, right? I do think NVIDIA will see 186 and worst case, right? Like if 186 breaks, then I think we see 152. And what are the algos telling us, OBT?
Algos again are just net selling down and to the right on the 1 minute and the 15 minutes. So they're aligning with your chart.
Yeah, and NVIDIA, again, another stock that's below its 200-day, right? You can see that once it got saved, twice it got saved. The third time, we rejected the 200-day, now we started selling off. So, I kind of feel like the market literally is telling us what's going to happen, and most bulls aren't really, taking the clues pretty well, right? So, yeah, that's just my thought on NVIDIA, but I do have a bull version as well, right? Not same as Tesla, but is this bearish call writing? I see a bunch of Bs, or did they just close their calls? What is your, kind of thought on this flow?
So I'm actually the top line. I'm pretty confident is bearish. Bearish call writing. The first three, while they're on the ask side, if you're looking at the spot price, it's going down. IV stayed flat. It was the same amount of contracts basically where they combined their 500. So I would say even though those on the ask side, given what we're seeing in the market and how it closed out today, I'm going to say that's all bearish call writing.
Yeah, and just not to be biased, right? I do think NVIDIA could, you can see that we actually have, the kind of the point of control around 200, right? And 200 is kind of a psychological number. So just not to be too biased, I did, kind of put up this bull scenario that could, in case this was actually call buying, we could play out a scenario where, it bottoms near 200 and we actually pushed it to 83. But yeah, I do think this is more likely, but yeah, just don't be one-sided, right? There's the put side of the trades are really crowded. The premiums are pretty high. So it's one of the reasons where, a massive counter trend rally can, take out the bears before it actually, flushes and has that mega dump to the downside. So that's the reason I'm showing you guys both the bull and bear accounts. It's just so, you're not too biased to one side. All right, let's look at the next one, which is GDX. So this is the bull version that I have, right? OPT. I do have a bear version as well that kind of suits the put flow that you sent me, but you can see we actually broke out of this flag, right? And am I reading the algos right? Can I interpret it as that the algos are, they're kind of still buying, but yeah, they did take a little move to the downside, but it does seem like the net, they're still, keeping up with price. I just don't see massive net selling, right? Is it okay to assume that?
Yeah, the algos I would say are on the 1 minute we're net selling and then have crossed into net buying minus that that dip at the end of the day. And on the 15-minute, while it's below price action, the price bars, it's still net buying or maybe call it stuck in a little bit of a channel. The algos are since that recent top.
Yeah, so I do have another version, right? I have the bear version. So this GDX chart kind of makes sense for gold, silver, whatever commodity you kind of want to look into, right? Because you can see we're actually right at the 1.618 fib. This is an area of previous resistance. So I do see why put flow kind of came in. I can understand that. And if the bear version does play out, right, then commodities are going to take a massive dump. And that could, kind of be one of a reason why, equities can kind of rally, take out all the bears before they actually dump. So what do you think about this flow?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely obviously it's interesting because it started off on the bid side, above open interest. So you have bullish put writing right there, and then it came in on the ask side. I'm a little conflicted. I'm kind of looking at this flow, seeing as it's either a really big hedge because they bought out till September, or it's two different positions. It's a little trickier to read, but I could see this one definitely also being on the bearish side. And again, they just bought themselves a lot of time by going out till September. So if the gold and silver and other commodities markets get squeezed even higher, they've got some protection to the downside with that time, or upside with the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that, but I do think that they might, get squeezed, because if this bull chart is right, then GDX probably goes to 53, right? And that would completely destroy their puts. But again, if the bear chart is right, they're going to make millions and millions of dollars because this would literally take, at least what is a 40% sell off at minimum? Yeah. So yeah, let's see which way it goes, right? This is basically, I feel like if I was them, right, I would use 40 as my stop loss because over this, it is going to fly, right? As long as this holds with resistance, they do have a chance to get hit to the downside. So that was GDX. So I know you sent me some bullish flow on Docu, right? So I personally so do you want to kind of talk about the flow? Is it bullish, bearish? I do see a lot of bids.
It's actually bearish. And what's interesting is it's bearish short term. On the last one for 600K, they bought the 70, or they sold to open the 75 strike for April 14th, and then to January 19th, 2024. So they bought a lot of time. But again, on the bid side, 600K and 500K. DocuSign was one of those, obviously, quarantine COVID plays that just did really well. That seems to be drastically coming back down to earth. Based on its move recently. So it's really interesting because they're basically anticipating DocuSign, if this flow plays out correctly, they're basically saying DocuSign is done for the year. Like it's just trading down between, now and January.
Yeah, I can agree with that because my wave count, right? I do have it in a wave 3 or wave 5. I do think it will bounce a little bit, but ultimately, I do think it will see, the low 50s before it has any kind of bounce. And this algo is kind of interesting, right? It looks like on all time frames, it kind of just popped up. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it popped up because, as we know with the algos, like DocuSign, where just some of the algos started buying just because it just is what it does when the system works. So I think that those are just like false pops or something. Or maybe like you have it on your wave count. Maybe that's the buying for the wave 4 of 5 of A, I guess is what it is.
Yeah, that could make sense.
Yeah.
And I did make a bull count, right? The bull just, I guess I didn't make it. Oops. Let me remove this. Pretty simple, right? The bull just assumes that this is actually, the bottom for wave. It did have a massive gap down on earnings, right? It just assumes this is the bottom of A wave, and then we have a massive B wave, in which case, those calls could kind of make sense. But this is kind of what the bull count would look like. But yeah, I do agree. It could have. I just feel like a wave force, a pretty shallow bounce, and no one really, tries to trade that. But who knows, right? It's one of those COVID stocks that's coming back to earth. So we can move on to the next one. Our favorite donkey, right? I like to call DKNG donkey, right? We know that DKNG actually, right, that it did break down from this massive, channel that it was in. Went to retest the channel, and ever since then it's been dumping massively. And this is some interesting profile. Are they late? Right? I feel like it was pretty obvious to short it at 22, but do you think that based on this portfolio, it has a lot more room to the downside? I personally think that 11 could be tested, right? But it does seem a little oversold to me. So based on this put flow, would you short something as oversold as DKNG?
The IV is a little high. It's in the 90s. Well, I know it can go much higher than that. So it might be something you could get at a better price on a bounce. The only thing I'll say is we had that the put flow for the 15th or for the 15 strike out until June 17th. And they came in pretty hot, pretty heavy hitting on those. Yeah, there's some bid sides worked in on there, but it's primarily ask side. So that's definitely just straight up, buy to open puts. And then even on the call side, the flow that I sent you, if you noticed, it was primarily on the bid side. And those are much shorter dated 315, 325s, and they're 17. So they bought them right when it was at 1690 down to 1683. So right when they were just in the money, and they collected a decent premium for a longer period of time, or a very short amount of time, 12 days from today. So I could even see it pushing down lower.
Yeah, that I didn't see the bees. I just saw calls and I was like, kind of ignore it. I'm just kidding. But one thing I do want to point out is I just removed the log from this chart, and you can see that if I drew, the fib from the top of this wave to, the first local low, you can see that we're actually, sitting right at the 1.618. And generally, the 1.618 is where, the ABC count kind of ends, and you kind of have that counter trend bounce. So yeah, that's kind of something, like this could be a potential, area for DKNG to actually finish, let's say a wave 2 before it starts a massive wave 3 reversal. It's one possible scenario, but as you mentioned, it's a lot of bid sides, so they're probably, writing calls to collect the premium. And I do give this chart more probability, just the way we've been selling off. We likely, break IPO lows and go lower. So yeah, it's kind of our take on DKNG. Let's look at the next one, which is my favorite, Plug Power. I'm gonna have nothing nice to say about this stock, but I see a lot of calls here, OpenSea, but I see a lot of Bs as well, but there are tons of As. What are your thoughts on the flow?
So the plug flow, it's kind of, it's nothing really too special. Short dated 318. There's a mix of it looks like sell to open calls and a buy to open call, buy to open calls as well. So it's kind of gamblers either way, in my opinion. Premiums aren't that much. So I wouldn't say that the flow is really leaning one direction or another for plug, but just given there's also that, that BB below bid, just was really quick, 45 at the right around close. I do lean bearish, but the flow kind of is a little mixed.
Yeah, and I agree with the bearish stance because you can see just the wave that we've been bouncing, right? We did reject this trend line that did act as, resistance, and we did, make a shooting star and the bearish engulfing below that. And honestly, equal legs target, right? You can see that this equal legs target takes us to about $14, and that kind of aligns with my wave count where I think plug actually sells off the wave C. It's one of those, most growth stocks have very similar charts. That's one way to identify laggards, right? And I think plug is lagging. So if anyone's, kind of looking for a quick play, I think plug at minimum tests the bottom of this trend line at 19, right? So whoever bought calls is going to get fucked. That much I know. But yeah, I did draw a bull version just not to be too bearish about it, right? In this version, you can see that plug could, it's still a counter trend bounce, right? So if you have a lot of time on plug, you're going to make money regardless. But this takes us to retest this previous channel that we, kind of broke down from at about 32 before it sells off to like $10. So this is the bull version of plug, right? A bull and bear. Longer term still bearish on plug, but I do give this more probability where we might, kind of break down from this channel and sell off. All right, so that was what I have for plug. All right, OPG, I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to hate this SOM chart. Don't kill me. Because that's kind of my view for the whole oil market. So let me kind of zoom out, right? Let me go to the weekly time frame, and you can see why I think so, right? Oil pretty much, right? ZOM at least top at June 2014. So ever since 2014, oil has, made a progressively sort of lower lows, lower highs, and then it had that massive COVID crash, right? So the reason I do think oil, right? Although okay, let me just look at the shorter time frame first, right? I do think that this is a wave 3, right? And we have that wave 4 sell-off before we have one final push, right? I think most commodities will have one final push to the upside, right? And I think that takes some to about 94 and oil to about, what do I have for oil? Let's look at that. Yeah, oil to about, let's say maybe 135, 140, right? But anyway, bigger picture, right? I think this was just a massive counter trend bounce, right? All the way from COVID lows. I think this is just a massive counter trend bounce. And right, most wave Bs end where the previous wave B ended, and that is about 96, which matches with the fact that I think, ZOM hits 96. But then I think that's where wave B ends, right? We know oil is overheated, it will sell off, but I don't think most people, kind of expect this magnitude of sell off that I kind of have on the charts. Any thought on this? I know you're an oil man and you're going to completely hate this chart, but yeah, what are your thoughts on the macro and micro level on this?
So yeah, I do hate the chart. Just to get that out of the way. No, it's going to be tricky just given there's the geopolitical environment right now, everything that's going on with oil, from a supply chain issue as well. It's going to be a little tricky. I could see a little bit of a pullback for sure in the energy names and the commodity names. I've shown you some flow where there's some bearish flow on ZOM, there's some bearish flow on Oxy, some bearish flow on XLE. There's some bearish flow earlier in the week on XOP, if I remember correctly. So oil's definitely, it's in the energy markets, definitely had a good run. So a little bit of a pullback is there for sure. But I could actually still see oil trending higher and going back to that 130 to 150 range potentially. And then coming back down. I don't think, this is on your C is what time frame? 2024, so 2 years?
Yeah, so okay. Like you mentioned, the 130 to 150, I do have a wave 5 that does push oil, has the one last push higher. So let's say, the Russian-Ukraine conflicts get resolved and supply chain, kind of resumes back to normal. Wouldn't that, be a catalyst that brings oil down, right? And that could, kind of be the start of, oil and electric vehicles getting more, solar alternate sources of energy there, then getting more attention versus oil, just starting. It's not going to come straight down. Obviously, it's just going to do a little up, down, up, down, up, down, and sell off. But yeah, do you think that would kind of, mark the universal top of oil where it just had a massive commodity rush and then, it comes back to reality kind of thing? Kathy Wood, seems to think so.
Yeah, Kathy Wood also said we'd never see, $100 oil again or some other number. I forget what she said, and she was
I
really
mean,
wrong
she
there.
couldn't really foresee a war, could she? But anyway, let's go.
But thing. Yeah, I mean that certainly could play out, but I mean, how quickly are people really shifting to EVs? We've got trouble with EVs because of the semi market. People aren't just going to just turn over and get rid of gas and all of that and the oil, and there's other makes for it. So I could actually see oil being pretty strong for a little bit longer. It definitely is going to have a top again. Could it get squeezed a little bit higher than where we are now? For sure, but I don't see this, shutting off the oil and everyone magically shifts to EVs happening as quickly as some anticipated happening.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that this is kind of on a longer time frame, probably not 2024, right? Probably like 2030 and stuff like that. But yeah, I do. What I was, kind of trying to ask is on a macro level, do you think there are any other catalysts, besides this war, right, that could, push oil further in the future? Like,
oh yeah, for sure. I think you'll see the one reason I think you'll see oil go higher is because Europe's just not going to buy as much from Russia, even once this is resolved. They're going to figure out other alternative solutions. It's going to probably maybe that's all maybe there's anticipation because of all the uranium buying and news you're seeing that it's going to go that route. But yeah, I could definitely see oil getting higher because I think what Russia's doing, even once they come back online, their oil is not going to go to the broader market. Sure, they've got China and India to back up as customers, but it's not going to be the same that it was. So I could definitely see the supply still being constrained and there's still being higher oil.
yeah, you make a lot of valid points. So, I'll keep that in mind and I won't short oil just for your sake. If it, like I said, like if it has that wave 5 higher, I will short it, but obviously I'm not going to, have a longer short, like I mentioned, right? I'm honestly like, I'm just going to keep this on here, right? But I don't really have a bull or bear case to not back it up. So, I'll kind of just leave oil out of my, radar. But another stock that's, been requested a lot is NEO, right? And we know that it has a gap at $9. And that does, your put flow does look aggressively, to the downside. And we know NEO did break this channel, right? Every time it's hit the top of this, it has, bounced off the bottom of the channel. And we did close below the channel for the first time in a while. So do you think we're headed straight down to $9 on NEO?
Yeah, I think there's the put flow is definitely really strong. You could definitely see NEO drop pretty hard. But there was that slightly longer time frame flow that just was a little bit more aggressive from a value standpoint. That had it going back up to 1750, and they put about 1.2 million behind it. So, but again, that could be kind of like the Tesla flow where they're anticipating the bullish case playing out, right? But the overall market's to the down, so I'm more believing in the put flow than that flow.
Yeah. So another thing that I wanted to point out was you can see that we're actually, let me move this. You can see that we're actually, close to the 1.618 fib, right? Like even when I remove the log scale, the 1.618 fib, puts us exactly, where we fill this gap to the downside. So again, we can, we could have bottomed here and had a, move to the upside like this flow suggests. But I think in both cases, right, whether you're charting NEO in a log or anti-log, right, this gap at $9 does look like, it's going to get filled. So I don't think it's time for NEO bulls to step in yet. Like, I feel like they're still great. That's at least another 50% downside. Damn, that's going to be rough. All right. So I do have one last one, right, which is Costco, and it kind of overlays the rest of, like a consumer services kind of stock, right? And you did have some pretty interesting put flow come in. I see a lot of Bs, though I don't like that, but I see a bunch of AA sweeps as well. So what are your thoughts on cost? I know this is kind of the reason I wanted to go over this is because, it's kind of a safety stock, right? Most people, even during the COVID crash, right, it barely went down like 16, 18%, right? Versus this wave chart, kind of says it's going to go like more like 30%, right? And bigger picture, right? I don't 40%. So that would kind of, kind of give us like when something like Costco goes down, LPT, you think that's kind of telling you the picture for the rest of the market?
It could be. I think the big thing with Costco is, again, they're so tied into that from a macro level with the supply chain, that it's a tough one to play, and it's one that obviously if there is a bigger event, people do use Costco as their stock up and store everything. But the flow it's a little bit on the lighter side. But those two puts, the 318 540, which are in the money, and then the 414 535, which are basically at the money, we're going to call them. Those did catch my eye. Yes, I'm deliberately skipping the 318 bullish put writing there. It's 130K. It was right. Then getting right around at the money. And the reason why I'm skipping over that one is just because the 440 for the same week, or the 540 for the same week put is just so much larger than it, that I'm inclined to say, Costco might have a little bit to the downside here.
Yeah, and yeah, so that's something that I kind of found interesting because generally Costco is kind of everyone's safety stock, and if safety stocks are selling off like this, then the market might kind of be in for a downturn. So anyway, LPT, I wanted to thank you for coming and doing this video with me, right? Thank you so much. You have any last words for the wolves? Anything you want to convey about this?
No, thank you for having me. And just, with next week, remember with FOMC, VIX expiration, quad witching, there's a chance for a lot of high volatility and a lot of movement. So just, size correctly and have risk management next week for sure.
All right, guys, thank you so much. And we'll see you guys